What's up, guys?
Sup?
Can you see us and hear us?
Yes. All right. Perfect. Maybe
Nice.
let's just wait a couple more minutes, and
Yeah.
then we can just jump right into it. All right. All right. Maybe let's just wait 1 or 2 more minutes, and we'll start. Um. Perfect. Okay. So the question is how we are going to do this right now because um Raw is that your name, man? Is that do you have like any specific questions that you brought today, maybe that we can discuss today? So, um, if you want to talk about something specifically, we can do this. I have prepared something, but I already talked about it in a previous call like 2 or 3 months ago. Um, so it would be good if you have anything in specific, if we would talk about that, because I think it wouldn't make any sense to just redo the whole tutorial if we don't have any questions, because the tutorial is already uploaded in the school community. Maybe just give me a quick update on that, and then we can start.
He said, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah,
What does that mean?
yeah,
So,
that's my question.
what does that mean, Raw?
All right, but we're getting more people as the time gets is going on. That's perfectly nice. I think the tutorial isn't that long either, so then we will just go over it. Guys, if you have any questions, please just let me know in the chat. I'm going to um, try to answer every of your questions, because this call I have prepared something that I did like a couple months ago already. So this call will be getting the most, or you all of you will get the most out of this call if you um, yeah, are working with us, and if you ask questions, because
I
then
wanted
we,
to ask you something, yeah.
yeah, all right,
Or maybe suggest something.
yes.
Like, maybe, like, talk about what you have done in your last video that you did, you and Lucas.
The thing is, there
Because
was
that
a
was that was sick. That was
thank you
really
very,
sick.
thank you very much, but I used After Effects for it,
Uh,
so
oh,
it
ah,
was it,
damn.
it was 100% made in After Effects. So I would go over it in here, but it's a huge After Effects file, and yeah, so I
Fair
can't
enough, fair
go
enough.
over it in DaVinci. But thank you very much for the feedback. Got great engagement, I think. So yeah, very very thankful. All right, so then maybe let's jump right into it. Um, I have a question, Edit. Do you know, because right now it says we have one viewer. Do you count as a viewer, or are you like a co-host?
No, no, I don't count.
All right.
I
Um,
am host.
all right. So then let's just start with what I was doing here. So first step, as I'm usually saying in almost every live call, was this basic 3D node tree. Um, and what this basic 3D node tree basically is just a renderer 3D, which is rendering all of our 2D information because we can't just put 2D into 3D space. And the reason we want 3D space, I mean, we could just animate the size and the rotation values, but in this case, I wanted to add a little bit more depth, and I was also like, as you can see, with the money, I was bending it a little bit to get more depth, and I was like making space between the different dollar signs so that it has a more 3D look and that it just has a cooler look overall. All right, so that's why we create this 3D space. So we have our 3D or render 3D, then we have our merge 3D. In this merge 3D is plugged in a camera 3D. This is basically just our camera, which is rotating because we animated it, and we animated it on the transform 3D one. So always keep in mind, if you want to animate your camera 3D, you can do this by clicking on the camera, going to the inspector, and then into transform. But I wouldn't recommend that. I would always try to use the transform 3Ds because you have more control, especially if you are having multiple camera movements. So I would always go with the transform 3D if you want to really animate your camera. All right, and then we have this mesh 3D where everything is plugged into it. That's something you always need. And then we have multiple of those image plane 3Ds, and those image plane 3Ds are basically just, yeah, 2D planes which are displaying our 2D data in 3D space, so we are actually able to see it in 3D. All right, so let's just start with our first shape. And what I did here was basically just going to Advato Elements and was looking for a rough paper, and then was just downloading it, and I plugged it in, connected it with an image plane 3D to put it into 3D space, and to just smooth it up and give it a better look, I was then adding a vignette. That's something I would recommend a lot of times because, as you can see, it looks very plain without a vignette, and the vignette is just giving it more depth, and it just looks cooler overall. All right. Um, then the next thing I did. Okay. So maybe we can talk about the settings real quick as well. So, because what I see most of the time people are doing with the vignette, it's way too strong or just way too close. Um, with those effects, you always try to make them very subtle so that they aren't really in the focus of your video, but that they just are um, a small detail that is displayed on your screen. All right, so next thing I was doing was adding another image plane 3D because right now I wanted to add those dollar signs. In order to do this, I was going to Envato Elements as well, but you can go to Google or any software uh, that you like where you can get images, and then you can just look for your dollar sign images and then download any one or any that you want. For example, this one, right click and then download. And then, because most of the times they don't have transparent backgrounds, I think this has, which is very nice. But if they don't have them, then you can go to removal AI slash upload, and then you can just add your image and it will create a perfect cutout. It has a free trial, free version, which is very nice. It works pretty good, to be honest. So I wasn't expecting that really when I first tried it out, but it was really nice. You could also just go into DaVinci Resolve and then use the polygon tool to cut it out, or to which is the other way, which I was doing in this case. So I was just taking my media in, I plugged it into my image plane 3D, then I moved the image plane 3D in 3D space. So as you can see here, I moved it around. You can move it around by just clicking on it and then using those arrows, or you can go into the transform and then play around with your values. And then I was adding the dollar sign, I was adding a mask to it to just mask out the part that I wanted to have. So in this case, I was just adding the media, and then with the polygon, you can just draw around the part that you actually want. And in my case, I have to check what was off. Anything was off. So yeah, in my case, it was too green, or it was greenish, and I actually just wanted it to be black and white. So what I did was then adding a color corrector into my node tree, and then you can, okay, just for everybody, if you have zero idea how Fusion works, you can just always hit Shift and Spacebar and then type in color corrector, and then hit add, and then the color corrector will be added. Or you can do this with any other nodes as well. So for example, polygon or merge or an image plane. You can find all of those in this little select tool, which you can get when you hit Shift and Spacebar. All right, so then the next thing was that because I wanted to have the focus on the money is power sign, I wanted the dollar signs to be a little, just a slightly bit out of focus. And I did this by basically just adding a Gaussian blur on top of them. So as you can see right now, they are very, very sharp. And when I edit the Gaussian blur, it gets blurred again. And then I was just adding another drop shadow, because otherwise it would look very flat and it would look like the dollar sign is printed onto the background, which is actually not the case. So yeah. Next thing I did then was moving this around in 3D space to the point where I wanted it to be, and then I was grabbing a bender which gets plugged in after your image plane 3D, because it's affecting your image plane 3D. And then what I did here was just playing around with the axis, and then I was animating the amount to have this kind of bending effect. It's a little bit laggy, but as you can see here, now it looks like it's bending, which is really, really cool. And then I was basically just copy and pasting it, so you can highlight all of it, then you can hit Control and C, then Control and V, and then it will get instantly pasted into your workspace. Then you can go into the Blender 3D, and you have then to just go into the image plane and take your ZX and turn it around so that it goes in the right direction. Because if you don't do this, then it will go in the exact same position as the other one, and we don't do that. So you just have to move it around a little bit, play around with the values, with the Y values. Oh, I forgot that. So in order to animate it, you can just go to the starting point, hit the keyframe button, and then you can go to your end point where you want to animate, or like till when you want your animate to end, your animation. And then you can hit another keyframe. Then I would suggest you to go to the spline, and then you can grab your image plane, drag it into your node tree, click on this little icon, and then you can, as you can see, the curve is appearing, and you can play around with it. So I would always drag out them a lot. Usually they are just dragged out for a little bit, but I would always just drag them out as much as you can. Alright, and then I did exactly the same thing actually for the bender. So I was animating them as well with the start and the end point, but in this case just the amount and not the Y value, because we have don't have any Y value here. And then I was keyframing, or then I was just dragging out the curve as well so that it looks smooth. Alright, and then the next step that I did was basically just adding the text, because as you can see, we have this text wipe effect in the background, and this is very, very simple. So first of all, I was adding a background, which I plugged into the image plane 3D2, and then I went into the background and set the alpha to 0, so that we have a transparent background. We always need a media in order to have little node trees, and because in this case we didn't have any media in, I just used a background for it. And then I was just typing in the text that I wanted. So in this case, it was just the money on the first one and the is power on the second one. Then you can go to the color and use whatever color you want. In this case, I used this very, very, very dark red grayish look. And then I was animating it with the rectangle mask. So I was just adding a rectangle mask, and then I was taking the soft edge and I cranked it up a lot. And then I was just going into the beginning of my animation, or where I wanted to my animation to start. Then I was keyframing the center value, and then I was going a couple frames forward and keyframing the end value. And as you can see, then we have this animation. And I think in this case, yep, I didn't even use any curves because of the soft edge. It looks already very, very smooth. And then I was adding a nice drop shadow to give it this last little touch. And in the next step, I was just adding this little is power, which I then I used the font Seago Script, which looks a little bit like it's handwritten, and I think this look just really fitted the scene in this moment. Also, I would really recommend, if you work on those projects where you have a lot of black and white, those highlights with one powerful color like yellow, like red, like orange, can sometimes really make or break the deal. All right, and then in the final step, I was just adding those little lines, and what I did was a little bit of cheating, but I just went into the internet and got a picture of those two lines, and then I was adding a rectangle mask to just mask them out. And after that, I was just adding a color corrector, and then I was just taking the saturation, put it down to 0 so that we have a black and white, um, lines. And then I did exactly the same for the second line. So I did exactly the same and was just masking out the part that I wanted. And as you can see, we have this animation. So what I did for both of them was basically just taking the image plane, and as you can see, we have a very, very, very long curve. So I was going to the start point of my animation, and then to my end point, so where I wanted the lines to come in and then end. And as you can see, I really dragged out those handles, and what I did was basically just keyframing the Y values. And then in the next step, I was doing exactly the same for the other line, but I was just letting them go from the top to the bottom. And then in the end, you can see that I also animated this spinning or rotating camera. So in the beginning, I was playing around with the Z value, and I was tilting the camera to the right, or like shifting it to the right. And I also made keyframes for the Y and the Z value, so that it has this backwards movement. And then as you can see, I as well dragged out the curves as much as I could to make it as smooth as possible. And then we get this result. We have to pre-run that real quick. No. Timer proxy resolution. Yo, what happened? Hey, yo. What? That should not.
Software has just crashed or what?
Oh, yo. Okay. So it looks like it just works on full resolution. I have no idea why it's not. But as you can see here, we now have this very buttery smooth Your Money is Power animation. And this basically was it already. I mean, we talked already over it in the waterfall. Want to talk about it again. And yeah, just let me know any questions. Right, then, so I think we don't have any viewers right now. So I think we can just finish the call. Yeah, or what do you think?
Your voice is not clear, bro.
Ah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think we don't have any viewers right now, so I think we can finish this call because I was once already talking about this animation. We have this turn now.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, easy.
All right.
And
Easy.
then,
Thank
guys,
you, brother.
yeah, thank you so much for being here, Aladdin. Very
You're
nice.
welcome.
I wish you a very nice day, man. Have a good one.
You too. You
All
too,
right.
brother. See ya.
Goodbye. See you.
Bye.